Good afternoon. I'm Mark, this is Sergio, this is Stan. We are pleased to be here. Sergio and I are pleased to be anywhere after what we've been through the last couple days. I think we should tell them what it took to get here.
An airplane.
2 airplanes, 4 airplanes. 4 airplanes.
2 me and 2 him.
I flew direct.
This shows you who they respect. We were supposed to be here yesterday, Sergio and myself. Wednesday night, I was just finishing packing when I got a text message from American Airlines saying, your flight's been canceled tomorrow. I was called Sergio, and I said, our flight's just been canceled. And he didn't believe me, and he looked at his phone, and he went, oh, our flight's been canceled. So I was on the phone for an hour with American Airlines. Oh, then about half an hour later, I got a text message. We got text messages saying, we've rebooked you on this other flight. And it was a flight going to like Saskatchewan by way of Munich. And it was an impossible flight. I got on the phone to American Airlines, and I was on the line a solid hour with a woman who couldn't have cared less. And we finally got on another flight. That one got canceled. Then we had another one, and that one is canceled. Sergio gets to the airport. There was no ticket there.
That's right.
Anyway,
I coming from Mexico, I did bribe that lady, and she gave me a ticket.
yes, that's right. No. And we finally got here, and it was,
We arrived.
yes.
I'm very happy to be here. And also, I just found out that this is the only convention that only catered to cartoons. I mean, to artists. No movie stars or celebrities.
Well, you're a celebrity. You're a movie star.
Well, yes. What do you want me to do? No, but the thing is that also they respect the copyright of authors, not allowing other people to do drawings that they don't belong to them, which it's laudable. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for respecting that. Anyway.
All right. Anyway,
You're the moderator.
I am the moderator. I'm the moderator everywhere. Anyway, I go to Costco and I just moderate. Anyway, we have been working together now for a ridiculously long time. Stan decided to buck the curve and stop being just our letterer and create one of the best comic books in the world, which he's been doing now for
35 years.
35 years.
No, GROO's been going on for about, 38, 37?
Since 1985.
Really? Usagi's older than you?
No, it isn't.
No.
Usagi started in 84.
Well, then I started in 83.
If Gary Grossman was here, he could settle this in a second.
Yes.
I believe we did Destroyer Duck in 81.
Yeah.
So, Screw started in Destroyer Duck Comics, which was a benefit. Sergio was not paid for that first story, thereby setting a precedent for all the rest that would follow.
No, I get paid. Mark doesn't get paid.
No, that's right, that's right. I knew one of us didn't get paid. We went to Pacific Comics. They went out of business. We went to Eclipse Comics. They were destroyed by a flood. We went to Marvel Comics, and for a while there, it looked like Marvel was going to go under. We went to Image Comics. I don't know what's going on there. And we're at Dark Horse now.
Yes.
And we'll finish them off one of these days and move on to another company.
You know that in the 10 years that we did GROO for Marvel, I was never invited to a dinner or anything by the editors or the publishers.
Gee, I was all the time. No. Well, I'd go back there and they would take me to lunch. You know, that's about it. We did I'll tell a story here now. We did a graphic novel called The Death of GROO for Marvel. And I wrote it, Sergio drew it, Stan lettered it, Tom Luth colored it beautifully. I have to tell you Tom Luth colored it beautifully, because if you see the printed books, you won't know that. Marvel was putting out so much stuff at the time, and they had a contract with a color separator. We used to have these people called color separators who would make the plates, and they would take the color guides, and they would turn them into color plates. And they had a color separator who was really lousy. They'd made a contract with this guy and decided his work stunk. So they weren't going to use it on any books they cared about. And a person at Marvel, who shall remain nameless, who didn't like us, decided to give the GROO graphic novel to that color separator. So the book came out, and it was ghastly. The printing was just dreadful. And the people at Marvel were embarrassed by this.
Somebody didn't like us at Marvel?
Yes, somebody didn't like us at Marvel. Anyway, so it was a how dare Marvel send stuff out to have something in the that isn't edited by me, that kind of thing. So they apologized profusely, and they said, when we do the second printing, because they print these books many times, we're going to have the book re-separated. We'll go back to Tom's original color guides, and we'll do it right this time. So the second printing will be perfect. And I said, great, that's terrific. And I told Sergio this. And Sergio was visiting New York one time. And he went up to the offices and he visited with them, and somebody said to you,
You want to go to lunch?
no, they didn't take you to lunch. You'd come from MAD, you'd had lunch at MAD. And they said, they said, don't worry, Sergio, in about 4 months, we're going to reprint The Death of GROO, the graphic novel, and we'll fix the color separations. And he said, that's great. Okay, and Sergio left. So the person who told him that decides to call down to the manufacturing division that schedules all the printing and things like that, and said make sure now that when it comes time to reprint the GROO graphic novel, do the second printing, we redo the separations and all the plates. And the person said, oh, well, one of our other books was late, so we went ahead and did the second printing already. They had printed the second printing of the GROO graphic novel from the original plates. And if anything, it looked even worse. So they called me up. This is like an hour after you left the building. And they go, Sergio's going to kill us. Sergio's going to kill us. They're so worried about this. So I said, well, how many copies did you print? And they said, we ran like 5,000 of them, the second printing. And we have to use them up in order to justify doing the third printing. And I said, well, how long do you think it'll take you to get rid of that second printing? They said, well, it might take a year because, second printings don't sell as fast. We got like 5,000 of them in the warehouse. I said, are we entitled to as many copies as we want? They said, yeah, actually you are. I said, could you send me 3,000 of them? And they shipped me 3,000 copies of the graphic novel without telling anybody to get them off the marketplace, and I ended up actually destroying most of them.
I was going to buy them from you.
No,
Bring them to
they were even worse. I gave you 2 cases of them, or 3 cases of them. Yes, I did. Anyway.
You sold them to me.
Oh, I sold them to you, yes. Anyway, so if you do not have the GROO graphic novel, Death of GROO, and you want to buy it sometime, get the third printing. Because the third printing, it's not as good as it should have been even then, but they did remake the plates for the third printing.
They did?
They did, yes. The third printing is adequate. It does not still do Tom's work justice. Sometimes they just don't take good care of you at some of these companies. So that's a story that I don't think we've told at the convention.
That is true.
And we won't tell it again.
Sergio, why don't you tell these people what's up with GROO?
Well, we are doing, we did a crossover with a great illustrator called Tom Yates. It was called GROO versus Conan. And it came out terrific. We did a lot of, it was fine. So the editors decided to do a crossover with Tarzan. So, and we are not that keen about crossovers because when we talk about respect for the creators, I think a crossover immediately breaches that purity of creation. Having 2 characters they don't belong to. Well, anyway, but because Conan was a barbarian and GROO's a barbarian, and because Tarzan, we took close to a year to decide to do it. So we did it, and we started, and I have finished the 4 issues, Tom Yates still finishing number 2. So, well, don't forget that as many who draw, when you have to draw a realistic, well-proportioned character, you have to take your time. A hand has to look like a hand. A GROO, it looks like 3 sausages, makes no difference. It's just little things like that. So I can do it faster. Also, humor lends to a little looseness on the style. So a leg is shorter than the other, makes a difference. So
What you're saying is your work is deeply flawed.
basically, yes. But it's rich in character, in movement, in humor. No, the thing is that I finished faster. Yates is still working on it because he draws the Prince Valiant every Sunday. So eventually it will come out. So that's another crossover, probably our last crossover that we'll do, because I don't really believe in that. You know? So that's, I think.
And then we're starting another graphic, another mini-series.
That's correct. We did the Play of the
We
Gods,
did Fray of the
the
Gods,
Fray of the Gods,
the Play of the Gods,
and the last one was going to be called
The
The
Day of
Day
the
of the Gods. Well, 2 of the series have come out. That means 8 comic books. Now everybody's confused about what one is the play, what one is the day, what one is that. So we're changing the name of the third one to The Gods Against GROO. That's what we're working on now. That'll be 4 issues, and that will be compiled in a book, how you call those, a trade paperback. And eventually the 3 of them are going to be made on a book, or a hardcover book. So that's what we're working on right now, basically.
Sergio, did you ever have a recurring dream that you were doing a convention panel and Death was sitting in the front row?
I told you I'm tired. Can you wait until the panel ends? I'll appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, I appreciate that.
Were you sent here by American Airlines?
Yes,
Thank you.
Stan, why don't you tell them what you're working on now?
Usagi Yojimbo celebrates his 35th anniversary
Whoa.
with a new publisher. I've been with Dark Horse, well, before Dark Horse, I started with Thoughts and Images, went to Fantagraphics, went to Mirage. I've been with Dark Horse since 1995, and I've just switched over to IDW. And Usagi's been, for the most part, a black and white comic. It'll be in full color now, with Tom Luth doing the coloring, and it looks wonderful.
Yeah, so he's not coloring my articles in Mad Magazine because he's busy with him now. Yeah.
Well, he's been waiting so long for the GROO meets Tarzan book to come out.
No, I do a Mad article every
Oh, well,
issue.
but that's mad. That's only 2 pages.
So now, I'm doing color for study. I cannot do GROO anymore.
But yeah. And the first issue comes out next week.
And it's in color.
It's in color by Tom Luth.
Terrific.
Yeah, that's about it, I think.
But
Oh,
you're
then-
doing more merchandising.
Yeah, the new trade paperback comes out in a week or 2 as well. The Hidden, that's from Dark Horse. And
No, Stan is so dedicated to his project, to his love with Usagi. How many trade paperbacks you have?
there's 33 in the Usagi Yojimbo line, plus I've got other stuff, altogether more than 40.
40.
40, yeah.
Very few artists that write, draw, create.
And
a
letter,
story.
I can letter
And
too.
letter. Don't forget that. I do a lot. I don't do any lettering in Mad. I don't think I have written 4 words in.
I don't think you know 4 words.
I don't know, in 60 years, close to 60 years. But one of the most amazing artists that we have with us.
And to you as well, Maestro.
I don't matter. I need help with my writing.
Speaking of anniversaries, we missed one last month. The
I hope
50th
it's not my wife.
No. Last month was the 50th anniversary of something. You want to guess what it is?
50?
50, 50.
Ah, you know what it is. But you tell it because it's an honor.
You don't know, do you? You have no idea. Yes, this is 50 years since I've met Sergio. We've been friends for 50 years. And I think that's long enough, don't you?
I think this is a good time to tell them
That's true.
that we're getting a divorce. No, it's...
Who gets custody of Stan?
Tom and I don't want to get split up.
In all those 50 years, we had only 2 fights.
3 fights.
3?
Oh, no.
Oh, this is one. No, and they were so minuscule that don't even count.
Yeah.
The first one was because I have drawn a story, I don't know if you remember, but some lambs that become cannibals. I don't remember why, because it wasn't that long ago. But Mark didn't like that they were lambs eating other lambs, like going after the lambs, even though it was just a comic book. But I don't know what happened with that we changed it to something, or...
We changed it to something. We were angry at each other for about 2.5 minutes, I think it lasted.
It was that big,
And we settled it.
and that was it. And the other one was in a issue of GROO becomes a giant, and he's eating, so he grabs all the food of that little town, and he takes a cow. Well, he didn't like GROO eating a live cow.
Have you noticed a pattern here?
So I says, why not? He's GROO, he's a giant, and a cow is a good morsel.
But the way you drew the cow, you look so upset.
So the thing is that I says, well, we will have to come with something better. I says, well, what about if he eats a salad? And I thought, that was very clever. And he put a dialogue, says, after a good meal, nothing better than a salad, and he takes a carrot full of vegetables. So he make a very good joke, much better than that when I have thought about it. And that was the fight. It lasted, what, 20 seconds, 30 seconds?
Oh, 45 times.
And that's it?
Yeah, that's it. No,
It's been good.
that's right. I told your wife that you and I never had a fight, and she went, how do you do that?
Well, the married people know that's part of it. It's normal.
Anyway, the biggest project I've got at the moment is next week we're setting to press the new volume of the hardcover Pogo books we're doing, reprinting what I think is the greatest newspaper strip ever done. And that's the big, it's very odd to be able to do a book that you can be run around saying, this is great, and you're not being conceited because you didn't do it. I mean, I love Walt Kelly's work. I think it's the most wonderful cartooning anybody ever did, and in newspaper form. And I can brag about a book without being conceited, because it's not my greatness in that. I'm not claiming that. It's just wonderful work.
The sad part is I grew up in Mexico, and because of the political involvement of Pogo and the lexicon that he used, all the words and everything, it never came to Mexico. So I was not familiar with his artwork or his strip or all until I came to the States. And then I started studying it, and to this day I still don't understand what they say. They use a very strange vocabulary and very, very, very in. So, but the artwork
Oh my
is,
gosh, yeah.
oh, it is superb. That tenderness of the little animals he draws.
And the brushwork, it was
I came into
incredible.
possession of a lot of Walt Kelly originals and a lot of unpublished stuff, and every time Sergio comes over, I show him something.
Well, Mark had the great privilege to date Walt Kelly's daughter for a long time. She was the loveliest girl and a great, great dame. And so Mark inherits that, and he's doing a great job. It's a great book.
We found, one of the things we found was, in years ago, if you worked for a company, when you left, whatever the reason your association ended, they would give you a letter of recommendation. Your boss would always give you a letter of recommendation that you could show to your future employers. So we found this folder that Carolyn had from her father's archives and things, and it's a folder of letters of recommendation, and the first one in it, they're in chronological order. And the first one is like, Acme Print Shop, Darien, Connecticut, Walter C. Kelly, age 13, worked for us for the summer doing designs for some of our print projects. You turn the page, and here's Walter Crawford Kelly, worked for some advertising agency at age 14. And so you go through these letters, and here he is working. These are things that Walt Kelly historians had no record of. They were work that's so obscure that, he designed a menu for someone you go through, and we're going through all these letters and things like that. And the last letter in the whole pile says, Walter C. Kelly was in our employment for these years. He was a brilliant cartoonist, and we are sorry to lose his services. We think he's very talented, and we hope he will do more work for us in the future. But in the meantime, you'd be very fortunate to have him. Signed, Walt Disney.
Yeah.
It's on Fantasia. It's on Fantasia letterhead. It's signed by Walt Disney. So, you find little things like that.
I want to ask you,
Yeah.
what happened to Garfield? Are you still going to do it?
We're on hiatus with the Garfield animation. I've been the producer and writer and whatever of the Garfield, voice director of the Garfield cartoons now for like 25 years. And we originally did a series called Garfield and Friends, which ran on CBS Saturday morning for 8 years. We did 121 half hours of it. Of those, I wrote 121. And then we had so many that you want to syndicate them. You don't want to invest money in new episodes when you can rerun those for money. So we just reran those and reran those and reran those. And then about 8 years ago, a French studio came to us and they said, we want to do a new Garfield series in CGI for the international market. Garfield is so well known around the world that we think we can sell enough countries in advance to make this. They're talking about a very expensive show to do. And we can make this, cost effective because of the Garfield reputation. So we made a deal, and we did another 300 of those, 300 half hours, 250 half hours of those, and then we reached the point where we had enough, so we stopped doing those for the time being, and we're just rerunning those. And they're all coming out on Blu-ray in a couple of months. So now, we'll probably do some more Garfields in a year or 2, 3, whatever. I don't know when. They'll call me one of these days and say, let's do another batch of them. So it's a lot of fun. The nice part is when we were doing the shows. "50 years." Anyway, when we were doing the shows for CBS for Saturday morning, you hear a lot of these stories about how the networks kept ruining Saturday morning cartoons and over-censoring them. When part of the deal to do the show was they leave us alone, so they left us alone. The network didn't even read the scripts. I just wrote them, we did them. And the international market has no standards and practices at all, so I've now done, 600 half hours of Garfield without any supervision editorially or censors or anything like that, so I have no excuses for why they stink if they do. But they don't stink, because a lot of good people worked on them.
So what's happening with Garfield?
We're waiting for them to say, let's do some more. That's essentially it. Jim Davis wrote the foreword for the next Pogo book, so that's nice. And I'm doing other stuff that doesn't matter to anybody anywhere. I'm putting, oh,
The blog is very
I'm
important.
doing, I have a blog that, if you haven't started reading it by now, you're not gonna start, so.
You should, because
it's-
you can go to the old ones.
Yeah, it's newsfromme.com. I just started working on a reprint project for DC I'm not supposed to mention, so. Anyway, basically, we're here to answer questions the rest of this time.
Yes,
If
if you
anybody
have
has a
any
question.
yes,
All right, this
that's it.
gentleman down here. I'm the moderator, I'll call him.
Yeah,
All right,
you're talking about Garfield.
all right. You mentioned it, you brought it up. Yes, sir.
So I really love the Usagi Yojimbo saga books that collect everything in a big batch. And I was wondering if there are plans to do that with the GROO stuff from the
No.
beginning? No?
There, at the moment, no plans.
No, I don't like the big omnibuses or all. I think it's a kind of a publisher to rip off the artist. Personal, I don't know how it works with him, but I think that the amount of money that you buy from a book, even though it's more expensive, they print less because they save a lot of money. It's like a lot of publishers when you want to do a graphic novel. When you do a comic book, you get paid for, let's say, 4 issues or 6 issues, and you get paid. Then when they put them in a graphic novel, they pay you when they sell more books. When they do a graphic novel, they want to pay you for the graphic novel, which usually is about the content of a book. They don't pay you that, they pay you a much less amount of money. So that means that you're going to get much less per page that you get. I like to have, because I'm another generation, I like to have a lot of books. So we've been trying to do the GROO
Treasury.
and that will compete 12 books in each. And it'll be very nice. It will take like from here to the wall for your house to have all the work that we've done. But that's how I like it a lot. You know? I don't like the big.
Oh, yeah, I know that, yeah, just like you don't like color shots.
It will happen one of these days. Okay, all right, I will, thank you, okay.
They don't want us to do that?
They would like me to repeat the questions,
Ah, very clever.
so that they get them,
can hear it.
yes, because the audience doesn't have microphones on.
Yes,
And they're actually insulting us under their breath right now. There's little asides about little heckling, things like that. Somebody else have a question?
Yes.
Sir, over here.
This is a direct to Stan and Sergio. Your books, I think would lend themselves very well to some sort of video or movie production. Have you guys gotten any offers to do things like that? I mean, I would love it myself.
Sounds great.
Hold it, I have to repeat the question. Have you gotten any offers to do movies or videos of your books? Because they lend themselves so well to that, says this gentleman.
Okay. Yes. But it's not as simple as it seems. For us, will be, oh, it's great to make a movie. It is a big business. It costs a lot of money to make a movie. Sometimes every producer has to agree with something, and yes, we have had offers, but the lawyers have never agreed to certain points. Mark takes care of it because I told him once that, and he had told me too, they're going to have a lot of meetings with changing things. Call me when everything is ready to do, and I check what everything is happening, and then I'll be very happy. But I'm not going to go to any meetings about the production end of it. And the reason is I know my father was a movie producer, so I know the industry really well. So Mark takes care of it. Mark, explain what happened.
Well, Mark takes care of it, because, you know, what happens is that you have character, a property that means something to you, and you want to maintain a little bit of control over it. And studios come in and they want to be able to do anything they want to it. You know, there was a period there, you know, there was a couple, like a period, a year or two there where Whoopi Goldberg was hot. And the saying was, you know, they want to make sure when the contract lets them change the character to something Whoopi Goldberg could play if she's available. And you don't want to give that up. Well, they want to protect their investment. If they're paying you money for the rights, they want to be able to do anything they want with it. So you have to balance that. It's a balancing act. How much control do we get? How much control do they get? How much are we giving up? And it's a negotiation thing. You know, it's just like, you know, you may want to sell me your car, but that doesn't mean you and I can agree on a price or on the terms of that sale. I may want to buy it, you may want to sell it, but we may not be able to come to terms because, you want too much for it, I don't want to, I'm stingy, whatever it is. So the deals kind of fall apart when you get into especially because it's so speculative. What are we going to do with it? Is it going to be animation? Is it going to be live? Is it going to be a direct-to-video movie? Is it going to be a movie? They're very complicated. The deals get very difficult.
The one thing I want to allow, because while I'm alive, then when I'm dead, they can do whatever they want, but I don't want a person impersonating GROO. I don't want to see the Flintstones GROO walking like like that. No. And we had talks with a guy very well known that wanted to use a very well known comedian to do GROO, and I didn't want to, and not fortunately, because poor guy died before they wanted to do the movie, but what was his name?
John Candy.
Chris Farley.
Oh, Chris Farley, yeah.
Chris Farley. And I just like the animation. I like the cartoony. I want to be part of. So the only thing I can get from a movie would be money, because believe it, they're going to change the characters completely, like they did with the ogre thing that was
Shrek.
with Shrek. The book was done by a very good cartoonist from the New Yorker, and the book had nothing to do with the original Shrek. I want GROO to look like GROO, and I don't want that many changes because. So in reality, the only thing I can get from the movie is money, but I want.
And why would you want money?
Because I sell an original for $100, and then that's what the gas cost me to go shopping.
Okay.
It's not like before that the syndicates paid a lot of money, and you make money in our field if they make a movie out of your work, or you're syndicated like in old times, and the people make a very decent living. Now the comics don't sell as they used to, except certain comics that they have a great following, but it's not a very well remunerated
Yes.
field.
Let's take another question. Yes, right here.
I just wanted to say thank you all for being here and hola, Sergio.
Yeah.
This woman claims she's known Sergio for 55 years.
Yes, and I know her family. And,
She's not 55 years old, however. No, you're not even close to that. All right.
I met her when she was a very young girl, and her mother was a lovely lady. The family is terrific.
Okay.
But,
Down here is this gentleman.
Thank you.
One of the most satisfying parts of GROO is the moral at the end. Do you start out with the moral and work the story to the moral, or does the story just lead to the moral at the end?
The question is, when we have morals at the end of a GROO story, do we start out with the moral and write to the moral, or does the moral just happen miraculously at the end without us thinking in advance? And the answer is usually the latter.
What?
Usually, we don't have the moral in mind when we start writing.
No, I disagree. Basically, I said, the moral is the story is, if you fall asleep, you don't advance. And Marx says, no. The moral is, you better progress because then you'll triumph. And that's the end. So he's part right. But not all right. Because sometimes I come with a moral, but he doesn't like it. So he changed it,
Yes,
and then it's after. So it worked both ways.
So the moral is, we don't know. Another question in the back, gentleman, right there.
That leads me to the question of what is the collaborative process between the three?
What is the collaborative process between the three of us? Well, Stan has the easy part. He only has to letter everything overnight at the last minute when it's not convenient for him to do so. The fact that GROO comes out as regularly as it does, when we meet any deadlines we have, except for Tarzan. And, but like when we did the GROO was at Marvel in the Epic line, we did 120 issues in 120 months with no fill-ins. And a lot of that was because Stan could drop everything and suddenly, letter pages when we need it, no matter what was going on. And Tom Luth also, doesn't leave the house a lot. We have him locked in, and he doesn't get out till he finishes coloring the crowd
Well,
scene.
Tom would get the worst of it because he was the last one with the pages. So when the publishers are getting close to a deadline, Tom's the one they'd go after.
But I remember a little anecdote that I had to deliver the pages to Stan, and we needed them fast, so I went looking for him, but on the rush I forgot his address. So I remember the street, but I didn't remember where he lived. And it was about, 11 o'clock at
Oh,
night.
no, it was 2 in the morning.
2 in the morning. So I figured out the only way to find it, because I didn't have phone, was to start calling him. I said, Stan Sakai, in every house. And suddenly a house lighted, and there he was.
My neighbors loved me for that.
So I went and gave him the pages to learn. But
And there was the time I brought him pages, and his wife said, "Oh, thank you, we were gonna celebrate our anniversary tonight."
Guess what I did on our anniversary?
And then I slithered back to my car.
Ay, ay, ay.
So-
No, but to answer your question, it's a very different process. In the beginning, I'm more used to everything I do and I have created has been without words. All my humor in Mad and in all the pantomimes, everything I've done is without words. But my creation of cartoons, I have that as an idea that develops in a story, and sometimes I go to Mark and I says, how this story can work, and then Mark can come with a story, or I can come with a whole story and give it to Mark for him to put the dialogues, or Mark comes with an idea and says, this is the story, and he explained it to me, and says, it's a great story, so I develop the plot, and then it goes back to him to put the dialogue, and sometimes he's written the whole thing, like he did an issue when Rufferto becomes a man, and then he cannot, goes back to being a dog, and that was his idea. It was a perfect idea, but I was writing in another issue, so he wrote the complete issue without me having to do anything about it, because, and all the graphic novels he's written all by himself. And so it works that way. You know, I go and I plan the story, and so I draw it completely, and without even him knowing it, I'll give it to him to put a dialogue, you know. So it works many ways, many ways. So we have that type of relationship that we have never worried about who did what, you know. I mean, we just do it and hope that people enjoy it.
And there's one issue where you and Tom did it all by yourself in pantomime without
Yes.
Mark and myself.
Yeah, well, that was sort of like, you cannot do a comic book in pantomime. You can do one. You can do a graphic novel in pantomime, but you cannot do a continuity on pantomime because you defeat the purpose of the comic book. The comic book is a compilation of both words and action. So one day, as a lark, I did a whole issue as a pantomime, but I started as a joke saying that I don't need you guys. I'm going to do it all by myself. So it was, we drew ourselves in many of the GROO stories in the beginning, and so that was the whole thing, and I did the whole story on pantomime, which was very difficult to do. And I don't think, it is really almost impossible to have a continuity without words. That's not the medium. I've done it for 60 years, cartoons without words, for Mad. Never use any words, except help,
Fire.
fire, anything like that. You know, so it is a different medium. You know, so the first time I used Mark I realized that I had now sold GROO. It took me lots of years to sell GROO. I thought about it in the in the 60s. During the 70s, I tried to sell GROO. And every publisher told me, No, we owe the rights. I had just come from Europe, spending a couple of years meeting a lot of European cartoonists, and all of them own the material. All of them. And suddenly says, wait a minute, I want to own my material. I tried to sell my comic to every company, and all of them said no. One of them told me, over my dead body will be the day that an author owns his own material. That's how, what would be the right word? How?
Asshole.
Basic. So one company named Pacific Comics decided, and when I suddenly realized I have to do a comic a month, I realized I couldn't do it with that mark. So I asked him, if we do a comic, will you help me with this? And he says, absolutely. And that was it. That was it. But it's been a fantastic collaboration. We know, sometimes we've done a project that we sit in a coffee house and says, hey, I said, we're going to I wanted to do a series of comics based on different genres. Science fiction, Western, to have a little variety of stuff. So we thought that the first one was going to be horror. And so we sat at a restaurant and said, so we're going to do a comic book about horror, and it will have to be a guy who is a guy who takes care of a cemetery and is going to tell stories.
This happened at a Sizzler restaurant.
This is a restaurant. So Mark says, that's great. So I started, planning it and doing the covers.
Well,
he was in some place.
What happened, we were sitting in this, we would go to this Sizzler, and they knew us there. They knew who we were.
Yes.
And they would write on, when you take your order, they would write on our order LAPD, which meant give them the police-sized portions. The Sizzlers had a policy. They give the police a little bigger steak, a little extra garlic bread and things like that. So we'd get the Sizzler-type portions, and it was just fine. We got, much more food there. And we're sitting there, and Sergio was saying to me, Mark, I got to stop doing sketches for fans. I'm just doing too many. They just turn up on eBay right away. I do some of the sketch, and I do something wonderful for them and then it turns up on eBay. Next time, I'm not doing any sketches for people. While we're saying this, the lady who took our order comes over to us with a little pad of paper and a pencil, and she says, could I have a drawing, please? And Sergio goes, oh, sure. I'm not going to do any more drawings for people. I'm going to not do these drawings. He actually, and then it was kind of like this. It was like, I'm not going to. He realized suddenly that he was doing a sketch for a fan while he was swearing to not do any more sketches for fans. So Sergio says, what can we call this character? And I said, he's going to be a black undertaker who plays the banjo. And I said, let's call him the Boogeyman. And he says, great. It's good. And he writes the name on a napkin, folds it up, puts it in his pocket, and goes home. And I don't hear any more about this for months. All right? So one day, Sergio's in Europe. And I get a call from our editor at Dark Horse. And he says, how's the GROO thing going? I go, fine. Oh, Sergio will be back. He says, how's Boogeyman coming? No, actually, okay, I've left out part of the story here. I'm sorry. I get an email from some reader who says, hey, I really like the new GROO, and I'm looking forward to Boogeyman. And I thought, oh, Sergio must have told this guy about this book we're going to do at some point in the future here. And I said to the kid, I wrote back to the guy and said, don't mention this name anyplace because we want to save, we don't want someone to steal it. And he wrote back to me, he said, no, it's on the Dark Horse website, the next issues. The covers are on there. And I went to the Dark Horse website, and there's the covers for all 4 issues of Boogeyman by Sergio Aragones and Mark Evanier. And no one has told me this. He drew the covers. Okay. So I call our editor, and he says, how's Boogeyman coming? And I went, when's the first issue due? He says, next week. And I went, we're in a lot of trouble. And just that day, Sergio was in Europe. And just that day, I had to go to New York for business meetings and things. So I go to New York, and go to the DC offices, and I walk in, and I say, somebody says, hey, Mark, how's Boogeyman coming? And I go, don't mention that to me. And I go over to Marvel, and someone says, hey, you got Boogeyman coming out next week? No. And then I went to see a production of Little Abner. They did a revival of Little Abner, the Broadway musical, at City Center, 4 performances, with Julie Newmar recreating her own role. And I walk in there, and I'm thinking, I get the boogeyman off I had Carolyn with me, off my brains, and we sit down, and behind us, 2 rows behind us, the writer Don McGregor is sitting there going, "Hey, Mark, hey, Evanier, how's boogeyman coming along?"
Well,
Anyway, I came back, Sergio, he was back from his trip by then, I called him up, and I explained it to him, and I tried to, and in time of crisis, it's important to be calm and reason, and I said, "What are you doing to us?" And he said, "Oh, we'll get it done," and we did. We got the whole, how long did it take us to do that first issue?
well, I don't know, weekend, something.
Yeah, something, and again, Stan lettered the whole thing, overnight, and we got the book out almost on time, and it came out on schedule.
But the reason of the covers is I was going to draw a cover for the Boogeyman to see how it looked. Then I was doing another cover about the same issue, and it looked very similar. And then I realized that it could make a great poster. So I drew 4 covers with the titles, and the 4 issues, when you buy them, if you put them together, 1, 2, 3, 4, it makes a poster. So I thought, that's a great idea. So I drew it. So I drew the 4 covers before I went into the inside, because they will make a poster. So there's 4 issues like that, and in the first one, there's the skeleton coming out of a tomb.
Him, he's on the
Yeah,
cover.
out of a tomb, and I'm sitting there having lunch, and if you go in top, there's a whole people burying somebody, falling into the hole, and there's some priests over here. So it worked exactly. Each one is completely independent as a joke, and all put together. If you look for it, you'll get the 4 issues. And that was it, and I was very happy because now we have the 4 issues. But all this happened, and we had to sit there and really knock it out, and it came out pretty good. Pretty good. We had good time. Yes, sir.
So what are some of your favorite moments in the business? People who had accolades?
Question is, what are some of your favorite moments in the business and the accolades? I would say you getting the Reuben Award was one of your favorite moments in the business.
I had other more beautiful moments.
That was one of your favorite moments.
Yes.
Tell him some others.
Well, the best time is Bill Gaines, the publisher of Mad Magazine, used to invite us, all the writers, all the artists, to a trip, all paid. And that started in the 60s, and we went all over the place, all paid. We share rooms, all the artists, with writers and artists. We went to Puerto Rico, we went to every place, Europe so many times, African safaris, Tahiti, name it, and vacation paid, great times. And when he came to go to Mexico, Bill Gaines called me and says, "I want you to organize the Mexican trip, because you're from there, it'll be easier." That was a great time, because I went there and planned everything that I wanted to do with the Mad guys. Having they done a bullfight, they're going to fight a bull, they're going to get drunk in a cantina, everything that I wanted to do. But the best part is that my mother, being from Spain and from Valencia, cooked the best paella in the world. So I figured it out that one day I'm going to take them home and have my mother cook for all the Mad guys at home. And I took the guys to do something in the morning, and by the end I took them home. And that moment when my American family, who had treated me like a son, that had arrived from Mexico, and they offered me a work that was godsend. And they have become my family. I knew them from, I had roommate with Don Martin, I have roommate with Jack Davies. They were family. And that was really my family. Bill Gaines was a crazy uncle, but the rest was pretty okay, everything. So suddenly I'm there in Mexico, my mother is cooking for all my friends. And I look at my mother cooking, she was very little. And it was sort of like drizzling a little. And Jack Davis, who was a very great cartoonist, very tall, was standing on top of her with an umbrella. It was great. That's a moment. And things like that happen to me a lot. You know, I'm very fortunate. But usually, getting an award like the Rubin Award, but every award is always never ask for it. They are given to you. You don't go for, hey, I want this award. You know, and it is amazing. You know, and then there's the friendships that I have made with all the guys. When I met you, when I met Stan. So I count them by the hundreds. It's been great. And yeah, I could spend the whole day telling stories about it. But I haven't done in a comic book called Sergio Aragones Funnies, which I do biographical stories there.
You should.
But anyway, any other question, please?
I don't think we can top that one.
Well, yes, we can.
We only got a couple more minutes.
I have a question.
Yes.
How did you, when GROO first started out, how did you become associated with Stan and Tom? Because of all the, people out there, how did you come to pick Stan?
Question was, when we started GROO, how did Sergio become associated with Stan and Tom? Now, actually, the first person who was brought into this mix was a man named Gordon Kent, who colored the Destroyer Duck story and then some of the first Pacific Comics issues. Gordon Kent was a lovely friend of mine who was very big in the animation business. He wrote for a lot of studios and designed cartoon shows and produced them. And he really didn't want to spend his life coloring, so he stopped after a couple of issues. And now you pick up the story where Tom comes in. Well, naturally, now Stan came in
No,
next.
it's when we came together was the thing for Pacific.
Right.
Then the
Then you
first
didn't know
one
that.
was Stan, because suddenly we needed a letterist.
That's right.
So
And I first met Sergio because I found his name in the phone book. We had a mutual friend who told me, oh, Sergio Aragones lives in Los Angeles. I had just moved up to Southern California from Hawaii, didn't know anybody. Hey, Sergio's in the phone book. I wrote him a letter. He called me up and said, hey, let's get together. He invited me to a CAPS meeting, Comic Arts Professional Society, which Sergio, Mark, and a wonderful cartoonist named Don Rico created. It's a cartoonist organization in Los Angeles. And I became a member. And I remember telling Sergio, oh, I'm starting to teach calligraphy at my church. And he said, oh, I'm starting a new comic book. And we need a letterer. Would you like to do the lettering? And I said, yeah, I'm a terrific letterer. And I had never lettered a comic book in my life. Fortunately, Todd Klein, at that time there was a magazine called Comic Scene, and every issue would focus on a different aspect of comic book creation. That very month, Todd Klein wrote an article on how to hand letter the Todd Klein way. So I just did what Todd Klein told me to do.
So then we got to Tom.
yes.
Tom Luth, you picked Tom to tell that story.
Well, we were in a cantina. No. I think he was a member of CAPS.
He was a member of CAPS, yeah.
He was brought in by Alfredo Alcala.
Yeah.
Alfredo Alcala, and he showed his work, and he was an excellent colorist, and he had done some comics, so he had experience on that. And he started doing the comic. In those times when they color comics, it was a completely different process. The computer didn't exist. So the colorists had to color 8 by 11.
Printed size,
Yeah,
basically.
Xeroxes, yeah.
There were no Xeroxes either. There were stats
Yeah.
that they make. And he colored by watercolor, and they put little names based on each color. What was orange 3, yellow 8. And all this went to a company that only did coloring separations. And they didn't care about the color. What they did is blacken big sheets with black. So the lady who did orange, whatever was marked orange, she covered it in black. So that was going to be printed in orange. The other lady who did reds or whatever it was. No, it was only the main colors. And then by percentage, the other colors will be orange. So if it had to be so they mark it. It was complicated. So, and then computers came in. And then you didn't have that many colors either. You have a certain amount, and that was it. With computers, infinite colors, shadowing, amazing stuff. To the point that I told Tom that he should get a computer. And because everything was going to be computers. I saw it coming fast. And so he bought computers. And in the beginning, it was hard. And he was complaining that it took too long, that he couldn't have enough work with other people. Suddenly, he was swamped with work because computers really took over. And it was just an amazing change on the industry. But the computers is for the coloring. And that's basically how we all got together. And we have never needed anybody else. It's been a very pleasurable working with friends. But,
I think it works well because we're friends first before we became colleagues, so yeah, it's always been a nice relationship.
One more question here. Anybody else? Yes, over here.
Oh,
The question is, what made you want to work with IDW instead of starting your own publishing company?
I've never wanted to start my own publishing company. It's too much work to create and do the sales side, looking for a printer, distribution, getting paid by distributors and everything. IDW is a younger, aggressive company. They're willing to take chances, and they're just on the street from about an hour from where I live, so it's easy to hop down to their offices and pick up freebies, and you know. But IDW, I enjoy IDW.
Okay, anybody else? We got maybe squeeze one more in now? Oh, over here, sir, yes. A GROO question is a silly question.
so it's GROO.
I got done reading the brain and the brain of the gods, and I was curious, is the cheese dip Bruce's favorite, or that's just a joke?
The question is the cheese dip GROO's favorite, or is that just a joke? GROO will eat anything. Cheese dip was a joke that started in an early issue because we had a scene where we needed to have GROO lusting after some food. And Sergio didn't specify what it was, and I thought, well, we don't want to do anachronisms. I didn't want him, trying to eat, French fries, or I didn't want something contemporary. I wanted something kind of timeless. And I thought, well, as long as man has been on this earth, he's had cheese in some format. And if they have cheese, they can have cheese dip. So we started doing cheese dip jokes in the book, and then people would start mailing us cheese dip. And one time, the Pacific Comics, when they were thriving that week, they had a big party at their offices, big open house party with everybody at the offices, and they had a giant bowl of cheese dip, and it had a note on it that said, "This is in honor of Mark and Sergio," and nobody ate any of it. And people would be mailing us cheese dip, and during the time we were with Marvel, the mail would go to Marvel's offices in New York, and then they'd forward it to me, and they would be getting little bags of cheese dip or tins of cheese dip. So then, shortly after that, we began doing running jokes in the comic about mulch. And people began mailing them mulch. And they called me up and said, "Would you please stop doing jokes about mulch? The office, the mail room is starting to smell like a greenhouse in there." And, so GROO likes anything. He eats everything.
Yeah, we have fun making the most disgustable things.
Yes.
And like the lady says, "But we use this to clean the hoofs of our cows." And Bruce, "Oh, this is delicious." We did the most disgusting foods that we could think of.
That was the meal on the plane yesterday.
Not on my plane. I
okay.
was
All right.
flying excellent.
Oh, all right. Anyway, okay, Sergio will be down at his table, Stan will be down at his table, I've got another panel to do. Thank you for joining us for this panel, folks.
Thank you.